In the brutal winters of occupied Europe during World War II, when supplies were gone, wood was frozen solid, and fuel was confiscated for the war effort, survival depended on ingenuity. Entire villages in Eastern Europe, from the Carpathians to rural Belarus, found themselves facing sub-zero temperatures with nothing but frozen fields and ash-covered ruins. Yet some of them survived, not because of charity or luck, but because of one extraordinary piece of traditional engineering rediscovered during those desperate years: the underground heat cell. This was not a machine or an invention in the modern sense. It was an ancient principle of earth heating, re-engineered under wartime conditions to keep people alive. Villagers and partisans alike dug heat cells beneath floors and courtyards to trap and store warmth for days without a fire burning. The method was so effective that even when temperatures dropped below -25 degrees Celsius, small shelters remained habitable. It's a story of resilience, science, and the clever use of nature's own laws. A lost survival skill that deserves a place in every modern off-grid handbook. Before World War II, the concept of underground heat retention was already known in rural communities across Eastern Europe and parts of Asia. Old peasant homes used clay floors and thick walls to moderate temperature. But when the war turned civilians into refugees, old traditions were put to new tests. The heat cell was born out of this rediscovery, an underground pocket designed to trap and radiate heat for long durations, using nothing more than clay, stones, and controlled airflow. Accounts from Polish resistance camps and Ukrainian partisans describe crude underground shelters where heat from one day's fire kept the ground warm enough to sleep on the next night. What they didn't realize then, but science confirms today, was that they were building passive thermal batteries. These cells absorbed heat energy during the day and released it slowly as the temperature dropped, stabilizing the environment without requiring constant fuel. One villager from the region near Lviv reportedly described it in post-war interviews. "We made the fire once, sealed the pit, and for 3 nights the floor stayed warm. We thought it was God's mercy, but it was just good clay." The design of a heat cell wasn't random. It followed a logic that could have come straight from a physics textbook. The core of the system was a shallow pit lined with stones or packed earth beneath the main living area. Into this pit, villagers would build a small fire for several hours, allowing the surrounding clay and stone to absorb the heat deeply. Once the embers were removed, the pit was sealed with a thick clay or brick layer, trapping the heat inside. That clay acted like a heat bank, releasing warmth gradually through the night and into the room above. In more developed setups, channels were added, narrow tunnels that drew in cool air from one side and released warm air from another, functioning as primitive convection systems. This circulation allowed a single heat source to warm an entire structure without open flame or smoke risk. For those looking to replicate this technique today, the principle is, well, quite straightforward. A heat cell requires 3 essentials: a dense thermal mass, like stone, brick, or compacted clay, an insulated outer layer to prevent heat loss, and controlled airflow to distribute warmth. You can adapt the method by building a clay-lined pit under a small shelter or greenhouse using heated stones or even coals, then sealing it once warmed. The heat will rise through the floor slowly, maintaining a stable temperature even after the fire has gone out. During the winter of 1943, when Nazi occupation left hundreds of Eastern European villages cut off from all fuel and supplies, reports emerged of entire communities surviving weeks without firewood. In one account from the Białystok region, locals constructed what they called ciepłe jamy, literally warm hollows. These were small underground chambers beneath barns and cottages where heat was stored during the day. Families gathered above these chambers using animal hides and soil insulation to retain warmth. Similarly, in rural Latvia, resistance fighters dug dual-level bunkers. The lower chamber served as a fire pit and heat cell, while the upper was a sleeping area insulated with moss and straw. The cell below would radiate warmth upward for 2 to 3 days after a single firing session. Soviet reports noted that these heat chambers reduced the need for wood by nearly 70% compared to conventional stoves. These examples weren't merely about comfort, they were about survival. The same methods protected crops in underground cellars and kept livestock alive. Some farmers even use modified heat cells under small pens, ensuring that animals survived the deep frost. The genius of the underground heat cell lay in its respect for physics. Instead of fighting the cold with open fires, which lose most heat through convection and radiation, it worked with the natural insulating properties of the earth. Soil and clay don't conduct heat quickly. They trap it. By concentrating heat energy below ground, the system created a slow, steady upward release that maintained a livable temperature for hours or even days. It's the same principle behind modern masonry heaters or rocket mass stoves, but done with primitive tools. No metal, no electricity, just understanding how energy moves through material. When you realize that this was being done by peasants using shovels, stones and ash, the ingenuity is staggering. Today, similar systems are making a quiet comeback among off-grid builders and sustainable architects. By integrating heat cells into foundations, builders can reduce energy use and stabilize indoor climates naturally. If you ever need to build a survival shelter in freezing conditions, this method remains one of the most effective low-tech heating solutions available. Start with a small pit, roughly 1 meter deep, beneath your sleeping area. Line it with stones or clay bricks to act as thermal storage. Build a fire inside it for several hours, let it burn down, then remove remaining embers and seal it with a clay or dirt cover. The heat trapped below will radiate slowly, keeping your shelter warm through the night. For longer-term setups, you can create multiple adjacent heat cells connected by clay channels, cycling them so one is always charging while others release stored warmth. Add insulation above, straw leaves or compacted soil, and you have a passive heating system that needs almost no maintenance. This isn't theory. It's field-tested knowledge drawn from some of the hardest winters humanity has endured. When fuel is scarce and technology unreliable, earth-based heating can mean the difference between comfort and, well, catastrophe. The underground heat cell wasn't just a clever trick. It was proof of human adaptability. Villagers, refugees and soldiers alike rediscovered that survival doesn't always depend on modern convenience. Sometimes it depends on ancient knowledge buried, literally, in the ground beneath us. These methods are more than historical curiosities. They're blueprints for resilience. In a world facing energy crises and extreme weather, understanding how our ancestors turned raw earth into a heat reservoir is honestly invaluable. Here on Echoes of Valor, we honour that kind of knowledge, the kind forged in hardship and tested by history. If you want to uncover more forgotten survival technologies and wartime ingenuity that shaped human endurance, make sure to subscribe, like and share this episode. Keeping these lessons alive is more than a tribute to the past. It's preparation for the future.